And with Shadows over Innistrad being out this past weekend, I wanted to do a deck tech. So a couple of years ago, I built a werewolf deck, and it's one of my favorite decks. But it's pseudo tribal, and with Shadows over Innistrad, it brought about some very big and radical changes to it. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a deck tech for you. This is an idea for modern werewolf tribal. It's Gruul colored. Should be fairly effective. And I mean, I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is, if you were wanting to assemble this deck, it'll probably cost you anywhere between $150 to $200. But considering the cost of most of the modern decks out there, it's actually pretty cheap. I'm going to throw out some ideas for other cards that could also feature with the deck. And also put it out there, maybe get your input and see what you guys think about it. So this is my idea for Gruul Werewolves. I'll put it out there, see what you guys think. Gruul Werewolves is a modern deck that focuses on getting your werewolves out as quick as you possibly can. It focuses on transforming them and keeping them transformed. And this is accomplished with a couple of the cards, one that was recently released in Shadows over Innistrad, and one original one from Dark Ascension. So what you're going to do with this deck is, this deck is not a wait and see kind of thing. This is a very grinded out, very straight up aggro kind of deck. It does use a couple of things to help keep things fresh. You will, typically with this deck, you're going to find yourself running out of cards in your hand, but there is something that's going to help with that, and we'll get to that here in a minute. So first off, let's talk about the land base for this deck. Now, you can go really any way you want with this. Generally, what I did is I have 3 different dual lands in the deck. I don't use the fetches, and that's only because fetches aren't really, well, they're also really expensive right now, and even though they're getting ready to rotate out in once Shadows over Innistrad hits, the best way that I went about this is just going with the dual lands. Obviously, you can go about this any way you want, but generally what I did is I use 4 Cinder Glades, I use 4 Rootbound Crags, and this is an awesome card, which it pairs quite well with the Cinderglade and the other dual land, which I'm about to mention, which is obviously Stomping Ground. But the great thing about these is that they all have pretty good synergy. If you get out the Cinderglade, if it's in your opening hand, obviously you're going to want to throw that down first, regardless if you have a land or not, because you're not going to usually have a 1-drop opening play. So getting that out into play tapped, not a big deal. And then your next turn, you can drop down a Rootbound Crag, and you're ready to go. But you want to run 4 Cinderglades, 4 Rootbound Crags, and 4 Stomping Grounds. Now, let's get into the creatures, and we'll start at the very bottom of the curve. It's the only 2-drop in the deck, which is a disadvantage, but it's also a really good advantage, and that is Mayor of Avabrook. Now, the Mayor is awesome in the fact that he buffs your other human creatures, and all of your creatures are human werewolves before they transform into werewolves. So that is, pretty great synergy. The only problem is, 9 times out of 10, this usually will die to removal first. That's why you want to run a full play set of this. It has recently seen a spike back up with the release of Shadows over Innistrad, but you can usually pick these up for about $3. That's pretty good. When it does transform into the Howl Pack Alpha, it's not only going to buff your werewolf and other wolf creatures, but it also gives you a green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, which is also pretty good. And that is the only 2-drop in the deck. So let's go to where you're really going to find your meat and potatoes in this, and that is in the 3-drops. So first off, you're going to start with Gaia Reach Bandit, and this is a critical key component of this deck, and we'll get into it here in a moment. But Gaia Reach Bandit has a 3/2 with haste, which is really good, but if it transforms, it says that whenever a werewolf enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. That's amazingly awesome. So that means that if you have that out and you drop down your Mayor of Avabrook, it's instantly going to transform into Howlpack Alpha. It's going to instantly give you another creature and also give you buff for your other werewolves. You know, do not underestimate this. This is really going to be an awesome card. And there's something that's going to help make it even more awesome, and we'll get to that here in a moment. But the next 3-drop that we want to talk about is Hermit of the Natter Knowles. Now, like I said, with this deck, you're usually going to run out of cards really quick. The Hermit of the Natter Knowles will make it a lot easier because it states that whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, draw a card. Now, it's a 2/3. It will die to removal. It will die to a lightning bolt. But it's going to cost your opponent. It's going to cost your opponent a card draw. And letting, you know, your opponent giving you cards, not something they want, but it's something that it will take focus onto other things that you want to live. I think it's really good. And if it transforms into the Lone Wolf, it's going to be really hard to remove this. And anytime they're going to do something like that, you're going to get 2 cards out of it. So all in all, I think it's a good deal. And then our next 3-drop is probably one of the most critical pieces to this deck in Ember Wolf. Now, Ember Wolf is an uncommon from Dark Ascension. It costs 1 green, 1 red, 1 other, and it has Intimidate. Other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1, and non-human werewolves you control can't transform. So, what is critical about this is if you get out Gaia Reach Bandit and then have an Ember Wolf, Gaia Reach Bandit is going to transform. It won't transform back. Therefore, any werewolf you play is instantly going to flip if you want it to. That is amazingly awesome, amazingly powerful, and it is something that you just cannot underestimate in this deck. And that will do it for all the 3-drops. So let's move on to the 4-drops. Starting with a card, this is probably the most expensive creature that you're going to run in this deck, in Huntmaster of the Fells. Huntmaster has gone back and forth in the last couple of years. It hovered around the $5 mark for the longest time, but with the release of Shadows over Innistrad and these new werewolves coming into play, it's jumped back up to about $10, $11. So best thing I can tell you is trade for it if you can. If budget is not necessarily a problem for you, then go and do it. I only have a couple of Huntmasters in the deck, and that's because you don't necessarily want to clog the work, so to speak. Next, in the 4-drop is Instigator Gang. Now, I know what you're thinking. We just got a 3-drop release in Breakneck Rider Neckbreaker. Why not use that instead of this card? Well, I like Instigator Gang just a little bit better because it gives attacking creatures you control +1/+0, and that's on its human side. So you're going to get a buff to your creatures whenever they attack, regardless if they're werewolves or not. And then if it transforms into the Wild Blood pack, your attacking creatures are going to get +3/+0. Honestly, I think that this is just a little bit better. Plus, if you've got out the synergy at this point with Gaia Reach Bandit and Ember Wolf, your creatures are going to get +4/+1 to their attack and defense. It's really good. Plus, it itself is a 5/5. I mean, it's going to be really hard to remove this. You know, it's not going to die to a lightning bolt. So, that's my opinion on it. That's why I like Instigator Gang just a little bit better than Breakneck Rider. But we'll come back to Breakneck Rider here in a minute or two. So, with that being out of the way, those are the only 4. And just like with the Huntmaster, you're only going to run about 2 Instigator Gangs. And then, rounding out the curve, we have 2 5-drop creatures. And these creatures are kind of the oddballs in it, but they also serve a purpose. And the first one is the Wolfer's Silverheart. Now, people are kind of questionable about this card, but you have to remember something. By turn 5, if you're dropping out Wolfer's Silverheart, you're going to have something amazing. You know, you're going to have something on the field, and you're going to have amazing synergy because that Silverheart is going to turn that creature and make it unbelievably strong. It will also make the Silverheart come in as an 8/8 for 5 mana, and that's actually really, really good, and people really underestimate it. So, you know, and I mean, again, it's going to make it really hard to die to removal. I mean, yes, it's going to suck a Path to Exile like there's nobody's business, but you get the idea. And the next card is not a wolf, and it's not a werewolf either. It's the only real true oddball out of the set, but because it fits the colors and has really amazing power, Xenogoth's God of Rebels. Now, the thing that you have to remember about Xenogoth's God of Rebels is this is not necessarily a creature that you're going to be attacking with. It's going to be something that you're going to use to empower one of your werewolves. It's going to, especially if you have one that's equipped with, that's soul bonded with Wolf or Silverheart. You know, let's say it's soul bonded onto an Ember Wolf. That makes it a 6/6. So Xenogoth is going to turn it into a 12/12. And, you know, I mean, that's going to be really hard to deal with removal. Xenogoth himself has indestructible, so, you know, it's not going away. The only way you're getting rid of this is either targeted removal with, like, Path to Exile, or something like Deicide or something like that. But honestly, that's not something you're necessarily going to see too heavily in Modern with, like, Deicide. You'll probably see Path to Exile, but they're more likely going to go after the creature that is definitely going to sit on the field rather than Xenogoth. So, moving on, we're going to move into our rest of the deck, you know, our instants, sorceries, planeswalkers, enchantments, stuff like that. So, once again, we'll start at the bottom of the curve, and we'll start with the enchantment Full Moon's Rise. Now, Full Moon's Rise is an enchantment that gives werewolf creatures you control +1/+0 and trample, and then you can sack it to regenerate all werewolf creatures you control. You may be wondering, again, why this is only a 2-of. The reason is because while it is good, this is not necessarily something that you're going to want to have a full playset of. I know some people do. An enchantment's coming up here shortly. I just think it's just a little bit better as a combat trick, but I do think that Full Moon's Rise has great synergies also with werewolves in terms of regeneration, and that cannot be underestimated. Next is the enchantment that I just mentioned, Howlpack Resurgence. Now, again, the reason I like this card, it is a combat trick, and it's a great combat trick because it's going to give buff to all of your werewolves. It's going to give them trample. It's going, you know, it's something they're not going to be expecting, and, you know, again, trample is absolutely a thing, and with these creatures, not something you want to necessarily trifle with. So, with that out of the way, let's go with the only artifact in the deck, and it's only a 1-of, and it's kind of an odd place, but still, and that's Bow of Nylea. Now, why this is good? It's going to give all of your attacking creatures Death Touch. Most of your stuff, you're going to have stuff like the Full Moon's Rise, or you're going to have Trample attached to most of these creatures. Death Touch just makes it even sweeter, because if they're going to block, they're going to lose the creature, no matter what. It should not be underestimated. There is not all that much indestructible in Modern, so it's something that it definitely adds a carrot on the end of the stick there. Plus, it has versatility in which it puts counters on the creatures, it deals damage to them, gain 3 life, and you put 4 cards from your library from your graveyard on the bottom of your library in any order. So, you know, again, this is just something that you really, really, really should not underestimate. There are only 2 sets of instants in it, and you do want to run 4 of them. Now, originally I ran Epic Confrontation in my version of Werewolves before, but I think that this card from Shadows of Innistrad is just a little bit better. It is much more deadly to your opponent's creatures in Moonlight Hunt. Now, why is this so much better? If you've got a bunch of wolves and werewolves on the field, you can use this to basically devour a creature, and the lovely thing is that it's just going to deal damage to the creature. Their creature is not going to deal damage back to you, and that is really, really awesome. It's much better than the fight mechanic, in my opinion. But remember, you want to be careful of this, because similar to the fight mechanic, if that creature has Death Touch, your wolves will die, and you do not want that. And then the last instant that you want to run in this deck is an absolute must in Moon Mist, because this will help you, again, enable your transformation. Will let your werewolves transform. It's also good as a combat trick so that you can avoid an attack and then swing for lethal on the very next turn if you can. And then with that out of the way, we have only 2 planeswalkers in the set. We have 3 planeswalkers in total, but only 2 in this deck. And the first one is obviously Arlinn Kord. Now, I know people are kind of iffy about her. I think that with Werewolves, it's an absolute must because, first of all, that first buff on there, giving Vigilance and Haste, should not be underestimated, should not be undervalued. It is something that you're going to want to do. And then dropping out wolf creatures and transforming Arlinn into Embraced by the Moon, mini Anthem effect, that is really something. Again, that's something that you want. You want your creatures to have a mini overrun on this. And then being able to use targeted removal with Arlinn is awesome. And then if you can get out the emblem and have him deal damage equal to its power target creature or player, that's just icing on the cake. Arlinn is definitely a card, has great synergies with werewolves. Obviously, since she herself is a werewolf, should not be underestimated. And then the last card is one I'm sure people are going to look kind of funny at, and that is Gruul Relentless. Now, the thing about Gruul is that he's kind of good in targeted removal against weenie decks. You know, someone is running Soul Sisters, you're going to sit there and take out, you know, one of their Soul Sisters with Gruul Relentless and then flip it into Gruul the Veil Cursed. So, once it is the Veil Cursed, you're going to get that black wolf with Death Touch on the field, which, let's face it, you're never going to attack with it, you're just going to let it sit. Or if you are going to attack with it, it's essentially like having both Nylea on the field. And then you can sacrifice those tokens, those wolf tokens that are created by Arlinn, created by the Halpak Alpha, you know, blah blah blah, to go and search for a creature card that you need, get into your hand, well, yeah, and then shelve in your library. That's something that's really good. I'd say probably the only ability you're probably never going to use out of the Veil Curse is that ultimate, because you're not really going to rely on having a ton of creatures in your yard. So again, this is just something that Gruul is just going to end up being weaker here with that regard. But that is the basic breakdown of it. Now, in terms of sideboarding, I actually haven't developed a sideboard for this yet, and I could actually use a little bit of help with it. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments, and I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's talk a little bit about some changes to the deck, some improvements. So I mentioned earlier that we had Xenagos and the Wolf for Silverheart. If those creatures do not suit your fancy and you want to throw in Collected Company into the deck, and let's face it, everyone wants to play this card. I love this card. I love this card with elves in particular. It can have a similar synergy with werewolves. However, if you're going to do that, you're going to want to limit your creatures. In that case, I do recommend that you take out the Instigator Gangs and go with the Breakneck Rider. Because since you want your werewolves to enter play and transform as quickly as possible, having Breakneck in there will be beneficial. I also recommend that if you're going to run the Collected Companies, take out Wolf for Silverheart and Xenagos. And I know that's kind of questionable, but take out those creatures for the Collected Company and leave the rest of it as it is. It should be fine. So, once again, Gruul Werewolves is a deck that is highly aggressive. This is straight up pump aggro, you know, pretty decent combat tricks, so a little bit of spot removal and a little bit of tempo. I like this deck. I like how it functions. Hopefully, it's something that you will find that you will like too. And again, you know, leave in the comments what you think about this. Do you like this? Do you not like this? What could be improved upon it? Don't be shy. I want to hear what you think. And so that will do it for this video. I want to thank you very much for watching. Once again, good luck and high five.